pretty fishy what happened to me on that ladder. And where there's fishy business, there's a penguin.
But wait, it happened at sea. C for Catwoman.
And the shark was pulling my leg. A sick joke. The Joker.
It all adds up to a sinister riddle. The Riddler.
Great Scott. That was a dramatic reading from the hit movie Batman 1966.
Or at least as dramatic as the 60s gets.
On episode 2 of Comic Movie Master List from Hit the Books Podcast. Stay tuned! Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Comic Movie Master List from Hit the Books Podcast. This is the Batman, circa 1966, Adam West and gang.
It sure is.
Oh, God. So we've been advertising this for a little while. If you haven't watched the first episode of Comic Movie Master List, it was Superman and the Mole Men, circa 1951.
Yeah, it was. Oh, my God.
So we had to jump forward 15 years to get our next feature-length comic book movie film. And very much like the last one, it was based on a television show, whereas Superman was the premiere for a upcoming television show. Batman had been in production by Fox, which is an interesting bit of trivia and tidbits I'll get to later. It had been produced for one season, and they decided to make a feature-length film featuring the cast in between season 1 and 2 to kind of get more hype for the show. It was very popular for what it was. A lot of satire, a lot of goofy over-the-top stuff. It was not meant to be taken seriously whatsoever.
There's even like a introductory like text read that they put on like brick to tell people, hey, this is all pure fantasy, and you know we're just trying to include everyone in this. Just come and watch this. We like this, and we think you will too.
Yeah, so it was very over the top, very ridiculous, very nonsensical, almost Monty Python-like humor throughout the movie. Very silly, but also with some weird adult undertones sometimes. So we're also kind of weird.
It seems the adult undertones are nearly inescapable.
It's yes. The answer to that question is yes.
Every time.
So whereas Superman and the Mole Men was campy for sure, but it seemed to be a little bit more grounded in reality and was meant to be taken a little bit more seriously. During our review, I kind of talked about it as being a mediocre episode of Twilight Zone.
Mediocre!
And we're all about mediocre here.
Oh, yeah.
This movie is not meant to be taken seriously whatsoever. It's just so over the top, so ridiculous. If you go out, just YouTube the trailer for it. That alone will give you plenty to laugh about for probably an hour, just because it's so silly and ridiculous. So yeah, we'll get into all this stuff. But first, let's give you a little bit of an introduction. Of course, I'm Chris Holcomb, and this is
I'm Burt Ward.
Or Emery Saunders.
Emery Saunders is gone for the day.
Which is unfortunate because we're going to record another episode of the regular podcast after this.
Oh, I'm sure he'll show up soon.
Our 50th episode, by the way. Be sure to check that out as well.
It's number 50.
We are your weekly comic book podcast, and this happens to be our Comic Movie Master List series, where we're going through all of the feature-length films that meet our criteria and reviewing them for your pleasure and creating a overarching master list of all the movies, starting from the earliest, which for our standards is Superman and the Mole Men, 1951, and going forward. The next one is going to be Tales from the Crypt from, I believe, 1972. So, yeah, 1972, and then the one after that will be another horror one based on the same comic called Vault of Horror from 1973. So, we had two kind of campy superhero films for the first two, and then we're jumping right into some kind of scare stuff, which is from the UK. Very interesting. So, we always try to post the links for free feeds to watch these movies if we can. Obviously, if they're not available, we will suggest some outlets that you can go to support them. And of course, if you want to just spend the money and support them, by all means, please do. There's no reason why you shouldn't. But these are very old movies, so it's obviously hard to come by them for a lot of people. And if, you're pinching pennies, especially during the corona crisis right now, which we're trying to give you a little distraction from, maybe you need the free feed, and that's perfectly fine for these movies, especially because they're very old. They probably should be public domain at this point. So let's jump into Batman 1966. Once again, like I said, it's based on the television show starring Adam West and Burt Ward as Batman and Robin, the dynamic duo. And I can't do this with the mask on the whole time. My face is getting so sweaty.
My mask is a little easier to handle.
And the sheet is an actual queen-size bed sheet, whereas yours is
God, yeah,
you got an actual cape like a pro.
Yeah, your thing, you're like trapping heat.
I am
Good
sweating.
God.
God. And it's a satin stuff too, so it's super hot.
Oh my God. How did they do it?
I don't know. Maybe that's why Adam West would not do the film unless he was Bruce Wayne most of the time.
Could you please let me be Bruce Wayne? That Batman costume, it gets so itchy.
So, of course, we got to start. Rest in peace, Adam West.
Rest in peace,
An
Adam
icon,
West.
both of Batman fame and Family Guy fame.
Fun fact, Burt Ward actually showed up on a CW WB crossover episode just a few months ago. With the Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Which is awesome, because he never got enough respect.
Never. Even though the man got to fight Bruce Lee on screen, he never got enough respect.
Sure didn't. Poor guy was always Robin. Always.
Okay. All respect aside, playing Robin is a really hard thing to live down.
To be fair, that's true.
Especially, there are a lot of iterations of Robin there. It's hard to live down being Burt Ward Robin.
Yeah. So it's campy, over the top, fairy shoes Robin is very hard to play off.
Booty shorts.
Yeah. But, speaking of booty, it was delightful. So
that was quite the segue.
This movie came out in 1966, as we suggested, after the first season of Batman 1966, starring, of course, Adam West, Burt Ward, directed by Leslie H. Martinson, and written by Lorenzo Semple Jr., and based, obviously, on Bob Kane, so he did get the credit on there. Unfortunately, Bill Finger did not get the credit, but, he's mostly the artist, so maybe you can let that go. But, again, this was in a controversial time for Bill Finger and his family, and they're trying to get rights and everything, and trying to make good.
It's a long-standing issue.
Yeah, so famous issue. There's a lot of good documentaries and stuff about it. I highly recommend you go check those out if you have the time. This movie is very strange for many reasons beyond just the plot and the dialogue and the characters themselves. This movie has a lot of weird things going on behind the scenes. So Adam West actually did not want to do the movie and would not do the film until the studio threatened to replace him in season 2 with somebody else. And then he gave in, but only on the condition that he got to play a significant part as Bruce Wayne and not as Batman. Now, I don't know if there's any record of why that is, but I would assume he probably just wanted FaceTime so he could be recognized outside of the mask.
Yeah, that is a very common theme when it comes to playing any kind of masked hero. For some reason, these actors want to showcase their face completely uncovered as much as possible.
Which is unfortunate because the coolest version of Batman is the one with the white eyes.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to see your eyes, dude. Which is why I wish they would find some nobody to play Batman instead of somebody who's established, because you don't need somebody to draw people to a Batman film. Just make it a new actor, like they did with Star Wars and everything else. Like,
yeah,
you can find someone cheap.
That's the thing with the Batman movies. I find it surprising that they haven't clued in on the fact that you could get someone like good at acting and also inexpensive, and it would still sell like gangbusters because it's Batman.
Absolutely, yeah. And like, if even the villains, if you got a masked villain, you really don't need them to be well-established actors. You can save so much money.
Oh yeah,
just by getting some, hardworking, new, good actors. There's tons of good actors and actresses. You don't have to go to the blue chip stock. And let's face it, they're not always blue chip stocks.
Right.
Unfortunately. But I would assume that was probably what was going on. He just wanted to be shown more so he could get more acting roles outside of this silly, campy show.
Yeah.
Another interesting kind of tidbit, a little fun fact, if you will, is that we don't have the original Catwoman in this movie either. And Catwoman in this movie is Lee Merriweather, who is the second Catwoman out of 3 for this show.
We were having some casting issues, apparently, with this
movie. And the original Catwoman was Julie Newmar, who starred in the first season and the second season. And then in the third season, well after this movie, she was replaced with Eartha Kitt, who was controversially black when Catwoman had previously been white in 2 seasons and a movie in the show. So it's a very strange dynamic that we had here, jumping from character. Julie Newmar and Lee Merriweather, the transition between those two is kind of not quite as controversial just because they look so much alike already.
Yeah.
Especially at that age, they seem to be very similar, and it's really hard to tell the difference between the two.
Which would be the point of recasting, is to make it seem similar but not distract the audience enough.
Yeah. So another character that was also kind of weird in this movie was the Riddler, who was played by the original Frank Gorshin. But Frank did not want to be in this film either, and they didn't know if he was going to be in the film until the last second. And a big reason why they didn't make a sequel to this movie is because the controversial black Catwoman, replacing the previous 2, in addition to season 2 featuring a totally different Joker, who happened to be John Astin, who's famous for being the father on The Addams Family, Mr. Adams.
A completely different Riddler.
A completely different Riddler, yeah. What did I say?
Joker.
Excuse me. Sorry. So it's very convoluted backstory between the casting for this movie. Very almost as ridiculous as the movie itself, just jumping from different characters and different weird just changes that are very dramatic, and very noticeable. But again, it's so campy and over the top and ridiculous. Who cares,
Right. Like at the end of the day, we're just trying to watch Batman ridiculously punch people and also Robin ridiculously punch people. But also, did we really question why this orphan circus teen was running around with this billionaire gentleman with a secret?
He's his ward. What more reason do you need?
Come
to Neverland Ranch.
Oh,
I'm Batman. Don't you want to play with Batman?
You want to be one of my Robins?
You can play with the monkey.
Oh, no! God! Oh, God, no!
Bubbles! Where's Bubbles? So, yeah, this movie is quite a basket case to begin with. So,
yep.
Another fun fact about this movie, it was produced by 20th Century Fox, which famously has made a lot of Marvel-based films. and is now currently owned by Disney, which...
Another fun fact to go along with that, I don't know if you're going to bring this up, but this would not be the last connection between Fox and Batman.
Ah, yes. Well, I wasn't going to go there, but you can talk about it once I finish this point. So
okay.
Otherwise, I'll fucking forget.
Okay. Okay, you make your point.
My Alzheimer's. So, owned by 20th Century Fox, who produced this movie, who is now owned by Disney, which technically makes a Batman film owned by Disney, even though it is a DC property that was licensed out to 20th Century Fox. How crazy is that shit?
Do not give Disney more things for them to try to pine after. For the love of God.
So as strange as it is, I don't know how legally valid this is, but Batman 1966, the movie, is owned by Fox, who is owned by Disney. Even though they are using the rights to a DC property, and Fox is probably more known for creating Marvel movies like X-Men, so on and so forth.
If Fox was going to own any Batman movie, it would be this one. If Disney was going to own any Batman movie, it would be this one. As much as they would salivate themselves to the point of drowning for the opportunity to buy Batman out from DC.
But now, please, bring up your point about Fox.
The other connection that DC's premier flagship hero, Batman, has to Fox is, and is quite possibly one of the most well-known Batman properties, Batman the Animated Series.
Which is probably the best superhero cartoon of all time, and probably among the best cartoons of all time. It's definitely up there with my favorites.
I mean, Fox was definitely killing it and knocking it out of the park with things like Batman, X-Men, and coming in like a not too distant third, Spider-Man. And that was the golden age of Saturday morning cartoons.
It really was, though.
Yeah.
I don't think that... I don't know. I don't think there's any doubt, but I think Saturday morning cartoons have kind of died. I don't think they really exist anymore like they used to.
Yeah.
Because people can watch cartoons anytime, anywhere with Netflix, Hulu, whatever their streaming app of choice is. Obviously, kids are on digital platforms, so they don't have to be at home like they are on weekends. They can be out and about like they are during weekdays watching these things.
Yeah.
It's a very different world.
Yeah. Streaming and digital, it's part of the ever-morphing medium of entertainment that we keep watching and trying to keep up with. You can currently, I think, watch any episode of Batman the Animated Series on the DC Universe streaming app. But, as mentioned before, there was a time when it, like many other Marvel properties, was under the banner of Fox Studios in animation.
Yeah, so little tidbits of information there. So yeah, just a few fun facts for you. There's several more ridiculous trivia facts. For example, the movie was originally scheduled to premiere in Austin, Texas, which was compensation for the creation of the Bat Boat that is featured in the film, because the Bat Boat was created by Glastron, which is headquartered in Austin, Texas. And in exchange, they would premiere the film in Austin, Texas to make a big hullabaloo there down in the South. And
hullabaloo. Interesting.
Have a good time. But, unfortunately, on August 1st, 1966, the premiere had to be postponed because, famously, at the University of Texas, a former student and Marine climbed the observation deck of the clock tower and began shooting people on the campus.
Oh, my God.
And then eventually committed suicide. So, clearly, there's some controversy and some crisis going on, and they probably didn't want to be associated with that, but they did eventually premiere the film there, as promised. Some other fun facts: Cesar Romero is very famous as the Joker during this series. He's probably one of the only consistent characters besides Burt Ward and Adam West. He famously refused to shave his mustache, and so you can clearly see his mustache through the makeup through the entire movie, of course. And this was not only true of the movie, but also true of the show frequently.
Oh, yeah. The man was really attached to his mustache.
He really was. And we'll get to this, but I don't think he's a very good Joker.
I mean, out of all of the people who have portrayed Joker, I mean, it's hard to do a worse job than Jared Leto, but, raising the bar an inch off the ground is not a good standard make. The mustache being there, I don't think is nearly as big of a memorable thing as this man really accentuated the part of, the clown prince of crime. It's like there are actors who portray the prince of crime thing, and then you have Cesar Romero, who's just a fucking clown.
He's just a clown. I don't. This is just a hot take. I know it's not popular opinion, but I don't like him. I don't think he's very good at it. But that's just me. I'm sure most people disagree with me, and I would not be surprised.
I mean, look, the Joker had, up until that point in the comic books, been known for just being a goofy bastard.
Well, if you get rid of the original version of Joker, who was a homicidal maniac who was gassing people and Batman was shooting to death.
Right. I'm talking about the version of Joker.
You're talking about campy 50s, late 40s Joker, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm talking
50s,
about
60s.
There are comic books in which, thanks to the internet, we can now relive this as a meme. The Joker's boners was a thing. Boners back in this time, meaning mistake.
If you look very closely on our banner page for our YouTube channel and our Patreon, you may just see a boner quote or two from the Joker of this era. I may or may not have included it in the collage of comic panels.
Yeah, this is the kind of Joker that we got in this movie. I think maybe turned up to almost 11.
It's definitely turned up. But more on that later. So, without spoiling the movie, again, there's not a lot to spoil here. It's campy, over the top, silly, so you can enjoy this commentary without actually watching it. But we highly recommend you watch it so you can enjoy the discussion. But without any major spoilers or anything, what are you giving it on a grade scale?
As someone who I'm a big fan, specifically just because of how humorous this movie is. I kind of want to give it an 8 or a B+.
That's very generous.
I am giving it a B+ for entertainment factor alone.
Wow.
It is. This movie can manage to entertain me in ways that quite a few modern comic book properties still fail to this day. Like, in terms of this being something that accurately reflects the heroes and the villains and, what it was like to read comic books, I'd say it was accurate for its time. It's definitely not anything close to modern Batman. And in the 60s, that people didn't want that. People we were all about camp, we were all about fun, we were all about making things sexy, 60s style.
Nice.
And yeah, this movie succeeds.
So I am going to give it a D. The reason I have to give it a D, despite how iconically goofy it is because I can't do this for an hour and a half. If it was a 20-minute episode, sure.
I mean-
I'd be right on board with you.
This
But
is
it-
like
it is-
3 episodes.
It is so much to take and so much to swallow and digest when you're watching this movie. I wanted to blow my brains out by the end. I was just so done with it.
Oh my god, that ending though.
However, God, so stupid. However, that being said, it is still based on the average of our grades.
Mm-hmm.
The number 1 greatest comic movie of all time on Comic Movie Master List because we've only done 2.
Because we've only done 2. Batman 66 is for right now number 1. So yeah, it's number 1 right now.
It is number 1. Oh, man.
It tickles me just how dejected you kind of feel just
I
from
do.
watching this thing.
I do feel pretty dejected. It was exhausting. I thought the chase scene from Superman and the Mole Men, where they had the hound dogs barking for like 10 straight minutes.
Oh,
I
that was
thought
just
that was hard.
Oh,
but
that's just the beginning of chase scenes in these things.
but the end of this movie, I just wanted it to end. No more. I would have given it an F if it wasn't so ridiculously funny at the beginning. Then there's just obviously iconic moments you can't discount. But clearly you're getting a bit of our tastes and the differences in our tastes.
A little bit.
But yeah, that averages out to probably about a C+.
Yep.
So
In the lead.
I'll go with C+ for now. With my D being the tiebreaker for any future C+. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Again, this is your last warning for spoilers. Again, there's not much to spoil, but, go watch the movie. Have a good time. If you get sick with it, you can cut it off early and not miss a whole lot. However, you should probably jump ahead to the very last scene because it is ridiculous and funny.
Yeah, spoiler alert for a movie that is, again, from 1966.
Last chance.
Last chance.
You've been warned. Okay, let's jump into it. So, very over the top, very ridiculous from beginning to end. No end in sight. Very memorable quotes, including our monologue there at the beginning of the show.
Oh, that's just a taste.
Just a taste of the great logic that was displayed throughout the movie.
Is logic the word we're going to go with?
Probably not the appropriate term. So we're going to run through this. The Superman the Mole Men probably went a little bit smoother than this will because it's so convoluted that I'm going to forget shit.
Yes.
And it's probably been a minute since Emery's watched it.
It's probably been a little bit longer than that, but there are things that I'm sure that once you mention them, it's going to come right back to me.
So the movie begins. We have Batman and Robin solving crimes and getting word that an admiral has been kidnapped and that they need to go check this yacht where the admiral has been staying. And we get our first appearance of the Batcopter, which flies throughout and continues to be on the series, but was not in season 1. So it's the first appearance of the Batcopter, along with several other different devices and mobiles and stuff that are very iconic, of course.
We're showcasing a lot of vehicles here.
So Batman and Robin, they hop into the classic Batmobile with the classic music.
That no one will ever forget that. No one.
Not even Bob.
Not even a number one. A guy.
So they drive out. They call ahead to have their helicopter prepared by regular people, which is hilarious. They fly out over the ocean in the helicopter, and while they're flying out, there's all these super over-the-top ridiculous scenes where kids are going, "Thank you, Batman!" and police officers stop in their full dress uniform and take off their hat and cover their hearts while Batman flies over.
Because he's an American hero.
And you're looking up so you can see his little underoos, and he's looking down, waving at the kids and stuff. Just stupid, ridiculous stuff.
This is on par with like the scene in Batman Forever where Val Kilmer flying the Batjet is giving a thumbs up maybe like a mile away from someone who's like saluting him. And it's like, how can you see this?
Yeah, so it's very, very silly, over the top, campy stuff. They fly out over the ocean, which leads to one of the most iconic scenes from all of Batman lore.
And this just sets up the entire movie.
So apparently there's a buoy that Penguin has put out there that projects a big illusion of a yacht that is moving at high speed.
Oh my god.
Batman drops the bat ladder, which is clearly labeled Bat Ladder at the very bottom.
Yes, lots of product placement here.
And begins to climb down it while his child ward steers the helicopter.
I'll hold it, Batman.
As he's climbing down and getting lower, he begins to realize that he's becoming way too close to the ocean surface and that something's wrong. And he starts yelling at Robin to pull up, because there's no boat here. It's an illusion. And at that moment, a shark bites Batman's leg and hangs on. And it makes these ridiculous, like, basketball bouncing sounds, pong, pong, as he's punching this prop shark and dangling on the end of this rope. And some poor stuntman had to recreate these scenes while Adam West was in front of some kind of, rolling tape or something.
Oh, yeah.
Dramatically trying to punch this prop shark. And then he shouts up to Robin, "Throw me the shark repellent." And they cut to a scene where they have several different animal repellents, including barracuda and whale repellent. And Burt Ward grabs the shark repellent and then proceeds to climb down to Batman and then dramatically holds himself up on the legs of the ladder and goes upside down to hand Batman the shark repellent. And then
because Robin's an acrobat, guys.
It's clearly this is very slow and clumsy acrobat.
This is his trapeze training. Hard at work here.
Clearly. And so Batman sprays this ridiculous aerosol can and the shark lets go, but the moment it hits the water, it fucking explodes. Just right from the get-go, the most ridiculous shit you could imagine in the campiest, goofiest way.
Can I change my grade to an A+?
Please no.
Already off to a winning start.
It was hilarious. For what it was. I kind of wish it was taken seriously and it wasn't a joke at all, because it would be even more impressive. So fast forward, we get to the scene where we had our monologue there. Batman and Robin return to shore, and there's a press conference, and people are asking, what happened? Where's the yacht? What's going on? The Admiral's missing, And Batman basically lies to the press, much like Superman in the previous film. So we're keeping a consistent motive here, kind of modus operandi of the DC superhero characters. Lie to the press and lie to everybody.
Oh, yeah. Journalistic integrity we are all about. But when it comes to the exploits of superheroes, fuck them.
Lie your ass off. And we get this very ridiculous scene where clearly Catwoman in disguise, pretending to be this ridiculous Russian reporter from the Moscow Bugle, tells Batman, "Show your face. Will you show your face?" And then he goes, "Well, sorry, ma'am, but unfortunately that would compromise our secret identities and compromise the hard work that we do." And then the commissioner steps in and goes, "Yeah, what are you thinking?" It's just the most ridiculous, nonsensical scene ever.
Yeah, and an officer of the law saying, no, these vigilantes should keep their masks on. Like what? Like, in what kind of world would we actually want to hold people accountable for crime fighting?
Yeah, and so she announces her name. And it's some long, ridiculous 5-name, 6-name. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 name Russian title. And then from that point on, Batman and Bruce Wayne refer to her as Kitka, which is not any of the names, but an acronym of all the first letters of each name put together. And for probably 30 minutes of this movie, I was like, why the hell is he calling her Kitka? At no point does she say her name is Kitka. And then I realized it was an acronym that they had just thrown together to make a name.
Yeah. For context, the full name that we're referring to is Kitanya Irenia Tatanya Kerenska Alisov. There is no fucking way we're saying that whole fucking name more than once in this film.
Yeah, so it's just, again, more camp, more ridiculousness, to the point where it's actually kind of clever. Like, who had to sit down and think of all of these stupid things to insert into the film? So that's kind of funny. And then a little bit of fun trivia fact for you. There's a scene with the villains at this point where they're shown on their vessel and their little hideout with basically tricking the Admiral and holding him hostage by telling him their ship was docked and that they couldn't leave because they're trying to get permission to leave dock. And so they just keep bringing him tea and crumpets to pacify him. And it's clearly Joker. No disguise whatsoever. Just Cesar Romero's Joker walking in and out with an apron and tea every few minutes to pacify him.
The clown. Prince of Crime. The clown.
But in the scene, you'll notice there is no Catwoman. The reason being, they did not have her casted because the original Catwoman did not want to be in this movie. And it wasn't until the last minute that they knew that Lee Merriweather was going to take the role for this movie. And then she proceeds to be in all the villain scenes after that. So just a little fun piece of trivia for you. So Batman and Robin let the press leave, and then they brainstorm with Commissioner Gordon and Chief O'Hara, who's this very over-the-top, Scottish individual.
Of course.
And they go through their ridiculous logic, such as where there's a fish, there is a penguin. It's the C, as in C for Catwoman. What was the other ones?
It's the shark.
The shark was pulling my leg. A joke.
The sinister joke. The Joker.
And then
this all adds up to
a sinister riddle. The Riddler.
Riddler.
Just ridiculous logic here. Which leads to them doing more investigative work, of course.
I wasn't trying to look for connections to Batman Forever, but in terms of leaps of logic, man,
it's up there. You wouldn't understand, Emery. You're not a master detective.
And look, I'm just saying, it's like, what are these letters? M-R-E. Mr. E. A mystery. What's another word for mystery? An enigma. Mr. E-Nigma. Edward Nigma.
Brilliant. And this is where we discover that the villains have a pre-nuclear sub, which means it's a diesel sub.
Ooh.
Again, kind of calling back to the Cold War era. And the things that were very present in the Superman and the Mole Man in 1951 are still very present in 1966 with the goofy, over-the-top, campy Batman series. So they have this pre-nuclear submarine, and they're launching these missiles out of it so that the Riddler can spell messages in the sky and send riddles that are clues to their next plot and plan.
You'll never get to the bottom of these, Batman. What does Batman do? He's a detective. Ah, fuck.
And again, it's the same type of leaps in logic that they solve these riddles almost immediately. And have to go on the search because they know that the Admiral is kidnapped somewhere and they need to stop these villains. They assert, because there's 4 of them, that they're seeking world domination. If it was one, maybe it was just a robbery or a crime. If it was 2, maybe just Gotham. If it was 3, maybe just the country. But with 4, it's the world. So, again, ridiculous leaps in logic.
You're going to take over the world, Batman. Wee.
And so we have this whole subplot that unfolds where the villains decide that they need to capture a millionaire in order to lure Batman into their sinister trap so they can get rid of Batman so that they can attack the world headquarters and basically kidnap all of these world leaders that are meeting for a conference and take over the world by holding them hostage. So their plan is to have the Russian press woman, who is secretly Catwoman, very obviously so, because she meows after everything.
It's like a tick.
And God, it's so ridiculous. And they hatch this plot where they're going to kidnap Bruce Wayne by having her introduce herself to Bruce Wayne at Wayne Manor, and then Bruce Wayne invites her on a date. They go on a date, and this leads to a very weird, uncomfortable moment where there's kind of weird sexual undertones between Adam West's character and Catwoman. And Burt Ward and Alfred are following closely behind, watching everything and feeling very uncomfortable with what's being said and what's going on.
I have to make sure he doesn't do it. Alfred, what are we going to do?
And the reason being because they figured out Riddler's riddle in the sky and asserted that they were going to kidnap Bruce Wayne at some point. But of course, Bruce Wayne can't deduct that it's Catwoman despite her constant meowing.
Oh, I'm sure women do that all the time, right?
Catwoman has this ridiculous Morse code radio transmitter where she's sending messages in Morse code to the other villains during the date. It's just so over the top. And we get to a point where finally they're up in the apartment building kind of having a little intimate moment, and Burt Ward says, "No, this is wrong. We can't watch this." And Alfred's like, "Are you sure?" Again, very weird, dirty sexual undertones there. And finally, Robin goes, "No, it's not right," and he shuts it off, even though they're supposed to be watching for a kidnapping. And this is when the villains break in and have this ridiculous punch-out fight with Bruce Wayne. Adam West jumping from place to place, trying to throw these guys around and punch them all. And eventually they overpower him by just jumping on him. Literally just piling onto him.
Bold strategy.
And they kidnap him. And they fly away on rocket umbrellas. Which, fun trivia for you. The rocket umbrellas that are huge, unfolded, or not folded, but collapsed umbrellas, just long folded umbrellas, like witches' brooms, but umbrellas.
Yeah.
That they're riding through the sky individually with an unconscious Bruce Wayne on the back. Meanwhile, Burt Ward turns on the camera and sees that, oh, clearly something's happened. All the furniture's destroyed, and they go, "Oh, shucks, golly gee, blah, blah, blah," you know, the campy stuff. Because they've lost Bruce and they don't know what happened. Clearly he's been abducted during this intimate moment while they're flying away on these giant rocket umbrellas, which were originally supposed to be, here's the trivia for you, backpacks. But for some reason, it was cheaper to make giant rocket umbrellas that you could ride than it was to make a rocket backpack for each character.
I'm trying to remember at what point the movie From Russia with Love came out, considering that also featured a backpack jetpack thing. Because I would have assumed that having that and just making it look like they're flying would have been cheaper than constructing rocket umbrellas.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And just looking like they're going, whee!
And again, because this plot is so convoluted and ridiculous, I forgot a scene. So prior to this, when they first show the submarine and everything, Batman and Robin go to on the Batcopter to the Bat boat. They ride out on the Bat boat, which is actually kind of awesome. I kind of dig the Bat boat more than anything. They ride out on the Bat boat, and check out the buoy to investigate. And then Penguin activates a magnet on it, which makes their belts attach to it, and they can't break free. And then they start loading torpedoes slowly and shooting them one by one at them. And
oh my God.
Instead of just taking the belts off and leaving like a normal person, they decide they can't break free because they can't take off their belts. And they do some bullshit science by reversing the polarity of the radio waves and sending anti-field gravity towards the missile so it'll explode prematurely. And sure enough, they make it explode prematurely. On the first one, and then the second one, and then the third one, the battery's dead. I can't stop it, Robin. And then it blows up, and they make it suggested that Batman and Robin have met their end. And then it cuts to a scene where they're driving away, and the villains are upset because somehow they got away. And then he explains that a passing porpoise saved our lives by selflessly throwing itself in front of that torpedo.
Thanks, Aquaman.
I just couldn't. I couldn't skip that because, like, PETA, if you're watching, Batman murdered a porpoise. Or according to Batman, the porpoise selflessly threw itself in harm's way in order to save them.
Oh, you know damn well he found the porpoise and fucking threw it.
It's just, again, just ridiculous. And then the submarine itself is also ridiculous. It's a penguin, but it has, instead of like propellers, it has flapping paddles, which are penguin feet that drive the submarine. And then Batman does some investigative work where it's obviously satire of the U.S. military defense, where they call an admiral and they go, "Admiral, have you noticed any pre-nuclear subs that have been released to market recently?" He goes, "Why, yes, Batman. We recently sold one to an Enigma." And I don't know if it was Enigma, but it was something really obvious. It was either the Enigma or the Joker or something real obvious, like Joker or something like that. Something silly and campy. And he goes, "Great Scott, Batman, you don't think that something nefarious has happened with our sub?" And then Batman explains.
It's almost like Batman called you or something.
And then Batman very sarcastically goes, "No, why would I think that, Admiral? Why would Batman be calling you about a pre-nuclear sub?" And then hangs up the phone again, making the Admiral out to being a complete, idiot. And then the Commodore, who is kidnapped currently, is also a complete idiot. So clearly, there's not a lot of respect shown.
There's a whole lot of big brains in this operation.
And now fast forward to Bruce Wayne being kidnapped. We jump to a scene where Bruce Wayne is tied up and he's being threatened and held hostage, and they're wondering where Batman is, and they talk about how they have this platform that's going to it's basically a modified Jack-in-the-Box from the Joker that's going to shoot Batman through a window out into the ocean, where there is laying in wait an exploding octopus that will kill Batman.
Surely this exploding octopus will do it.
And they're going to lure him in by having him come to rescue Batman. And then this proceeds this whole thing where Catwoman is going back and forth between Catwoman and the Russian Kitka and pretending to kind of figure things out. And then Batman fools her. Well, Bruce Wayne fools her by pretending he has a little monitor in his sleeve to send radio transmissions to the police. His argument is, "Why, of course I do. I'm a capitalist. What do you think wealthy capitalists do? They must secure their funds." Just ridiculous stuff. Obvious satire, of course.
Of course.
And so he tricks them because now they have to untie his hands in order to get in the sleeve, and then he uses his free hands to start fighting them and pushing them and fighting him off. And then some pirate goons come in and try to fight him. And then Bruce Wayne murders a guy. Just straight up murders a dude by pushing him onto the platform that ejects him out through the window and then blows him up. And then Bruce Wayne, again, fights them off and then escapes through the window and runs away, runs back to the manor where he's greeted by a frantically pacing Dick Grayson and Alfred, who are could not figure anything out, or couldn't figure out who took them or where they took them or anything without Batman's help.
We need Bruce Wayne's big brain to help us figure out this riddle.
So again, they were just pacing back and forth, doing exactly that, hand writhing.
It's a very angry teen that Batman just decided to adopt.
And then Bruce Wayne does not bother explaining anything. The commissioner goes, "Oh, Greg Scott, you're away." And then Bruce Wayne explains that, "Oh, Batman saved me, Commissioner. It's all good." And then sends everybody home and pretends that they're going to go up to bed and relax or whatever. And then once everybody's walked out the door, they turn around and run down to the bat poles so they can jump down to the Bat Cave and become Batman and Robin and everything.
Yeah, I didn't remember until watching that movie that in order for them to get their costumes on, like I used to think it was just, oh, they slide down the pole and, they just jump into their costumes. On their way down, there is a switch that they flip.
Sure is.
That just which I'm just calling it the cut to the costume scene. It's like, psh, now we're in costume.
Yeah. So ridiculous sequence of events. Again, campy, over the top, ridiculous, as it was intended to be.
Of course.
And they go down, and now they have to solve, what's their grand scheme in this? What are they going to do next? How do we stop them? And again, it's very convoluted. I don't remember every little detail because at this point the movie had been like an hour long and I was just kind of done with it. But I kept watching because we got to do this. It's for our fans, all 10 of you. We love you. By the way, we have a Patreon. If you want to submit to Patreon and help us out, we'd very much appreciate it. Patreon.com/hitthebooks. Thank you, Heather Reap, once again.
Shameless plug.
But we get to the scene where they go out and the villains reveal that they have a dehydrator, which they are going to use to dehydrate these world leaders and then store them in little vials and kidnap them on their sub.
This actually reminds me of the, now that I think about it, kind of absurd device that was implemented in the movie Batman Begins. It's like, oh, wait, how are we going to fear gas the entire city?
Steam machine.
Steam machine. How are we going to steam all this water? We're going to use something that produces a stupid amount of microwaves that
Hot.
is going to turn all of the Gotham's water supply into gas.
Steamy.
How is it that doesn't just immediately kill everyone who's any kind of close to that? We're mostly water.
It's true. It's a fair point, dog. It's a fair point. It's a perfect analogy, despite how good that movie is.
Some things still hold over, apparently.
You might have just ruined that movie for me. So thanks, Emery. Of
You
course,
think
we
I
get
wear
to
this marvel across my chest for nothing?
What a stooge.
Ha! I've tricked you and foiled you all along.
How's Jonathan Hickman treating you?
How dare you?
Still sore, huh?
Sore that he made my favorite collection of heroes all a bunch of plant-based villains.
Cuck ducks. Nice.
Cack.
All right, back to the movie at
At large.
at hand here. Yeah. So we have this whole Insidious plot, and we have this whole sequence, which again this is something I want to emphasize here. The Penguin really drives this entire movie. Penguin is clearly the ringleader of the entire operation, and
the Dr. Evil, if you will.
in my opinion, Burgess Meredith is easily the best character actor in this entire movie.
Easily.
Easily.
Oh my God.
I mean, Lee Merriweather does a pretty good job, and then obviously the others are iconic for their roles. But I really think that Burgess Meredith really goes all in, and he does a great job of it. And it's just so over the top. So
How does how does a vaguely bird-themed gangster manage to outact the Riddler, the Joker, and Catwoman?
Yeah, it's impressive. And he has some great kind of lines and improv parts, which happens in the scene. Again, another fun trivia fact that I learned while doing research on this movie. So in this scene, they're testing the dehydrator ahead of time on their goons.
Yeah.
And they literally are called guinea pigs 1 through 5.
Oh, my God.
And he calls them
this.
in, and they have GP, number 1, number 2, number 3, so on and so forth, for guinea pig.
Yeah.
And then he uses the dehydrator on each and every one of them because they're going to test this plan out by having the Penguin pretend to be the Admiral or the Commodore, and who is kidnapped currently, and then have Batman take him back to the Batcave, and then he's going to rehydrate all of his goons, and then they're going to ambush Batman and Robin in the Batcave with the rehydrated goons.
Because when it comes to goons, you can just add water. It's not like turning you to dust won't immediately kill you.
It's just like extras. Go check that out, Hollywood. I'm sure it works. Save that budget.
Oh, my God.
And if they die, you got CG. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm sure it's fine. Everything's fine.
So this whole plan is hatched. They go back to the bay where Bruce Wayne was kidnapped to try to investigate. And this is where we get the infamous bomb scene where they've left a bomb in there. The villains are gone. They've left a bomb in order to kill Batman if he comes to investigate.
My favorite. This is like literally my favorite running scene throughout this entire movie.
And so we have the iconic GIF that people have seen all over the internet where Batman is running around with this giant round bomb trying to get rid of it, running all the way up and down the dock and not finding any safe place to throw the bomb and get rid of it, which is very reminiscent of another Nolan movie where he has to get rid of a bomb.
Wow, that is... God, that's so true.
In The Dark Knight Rises, we feature another such bomb that Batman has to take over the lake and get rid of.
The bomb is armed. The bomb is mobile. And the identity of the Trigger Man is a mystery.
Which this bomb had to have a Trigger Man because it stayed lit for a long ass time. He was running around with this bomb for like 10 minutes straight.
It's like, why? What are nuns doing here? What's this baby and this mom doing here? What's this gaggle of people just walking? Why do I keep running into them? Where do I put this bomb?
There's a weird marching band going up and down the pier. There's groups of drunk sailors. He can't get rid of the people in the bar because there's two fat ladies munching down and refusing to leave, despite everybody else running away. Nobody on the pier seems panicked, even though everybody in the bar was panicked and ran away.
I like how they just all calmly walk away from him while Batman is like, move, move.
Well, that's the thing. He doesn't even say move. He doesn't say anything.
He doesn't. He's silent this whole time.
Stares at them for a second, considers it, and then turns around and runs another direction.
like running around with a comically large, cartoonishly constructed bomb. And everyone's like, oh, it's just Batman running around. I'm sure it's fine.
And then at one point, he stops for a group of ducks after a porpoise sacrificed its life to save him. He couldn't sacrifice the ducks.
I won't take any more nature dying tonight.
Except the people he kills. But we'll get to that. So then he runs. Eventually, the scene leads to him running to the end of the pier, tossing the bomb at the last minute, and he hides behind some steel rods. Again, they insinuate that he's died, and Burt Ward's Robin runs over and is sad, and then he sees Adam West pop up. It's okay, Robin. I'm all right. He stands up from behind these steel poles or whatever that are sitting there that somehow shielded him from the bomb's explosion.
Yeah, he just stands up. It's like he was hiding from the audience specifically. It's just like, oh, it's fine, Robin.
Exactly. It's so ridiculous. It's so silly. And this is where we get introduced to Commodore Penguin, who comes waddling over, going, wah, 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 despite being in disguise as the Commodore. And then they have a talk, without looking at the Penguin, who's pretending to be the Commodore. And they go, it's the Penguin, right? I don't know, Robin. I think so. It has to be. And so they know
it's almost like he makes that sound and waddles like a criminal we know.
But I just think it's funny that they solve all these riddles with these ridiculous leaps of logic, and then they don't realize that Kitka is the Catwoman until the middle of the movie. Meanwhile, the Penguin they figure out right away. And so, again, Meredith was just playing his ass off for this movie, and it had no right for him to play the role so hard. And so they take him in the Batmobile, unaware of his vile rehydration plot, and take him to the Batcave, where they're going to give him a retinal scan to confirm that it is the Commodore. I don't know why that word won't come to my brain. Keep wanting to say Admiral. The Commodore. So they take him back to the Batcave, and he talks his ass off while Batman and Robin are preparing the equipment, and then goes over to get himself a glass of water from the water dispenser, where they have regular water and heavy water, which Batman uses for his experiments. And so the Penguin accidentally fills the vials with heavy water, which apparently overinflates the goons. And so when Batman and Robin go to fight the goons, they all start popping and disappearing, meaning they killed them. So Robin killed one guy, Batman killed two guys, and then Penguin killed two guys. In that scene alone, they're dead. They're murdered. They literally murdered them in front of you because they were filled with heavy water and they popped. So
technically, they were killed twice.
They were dehydrated. They were not dead, sir.
Oh, come on.
We know the truth.
They were dust. Thanos couldn't have dusted them harder than this.
So they have this whole segment where they beat them up and Penguin's kind of trapped, but then Penguin steals the Batmobile by tricking them with gas and runs away, having stolen the Batmobile. Back to the original supervillains, who now hatch their plan to use the dehydrator to attack the World Center and abduct all of these world officials from various different countries. And it shows a scene where they're all arguing in a room together, all speaking completely different languages, so of course nobody can understand each other. And
of course
they break in, and this leads to this whole break-in sequence where Penguin is pretending to be an innocent bystander, and then he gasses all of them with his umbrella that opens and floats across the room, spreading the gas, and knocks out all the guards, two of which fall together, cross-shouldered, and hold each other up with their unconscious bodies. And then Penguin proceeds to climb underneath them and climb under them again on the way back. And it's just so ridiculous. Then the other villains come up in the elevator, all in full costume, of course.
Of course.
And go up there and start dehydrating each individual ambassador. And, of course, they're arguing so much they don't even notice that each one is being turned to dust. And then they proceed to start sweeping each of them into a vial, which ends the scene. And they go back to the submarine. Flash forward, Batman and Robin head out there in their bat boat to assault the submarine. They basically run a circle, and they have this weird, radar gun or something that they're using. And they're shooting this weird radar pulse at the submarine, somehow not realizing that they dehydrated these people. And so you see the vial bouncing back and forth, potentially breaking, and everybody freaking out. And finally, they force the submarine to come up because it's getting too much damage. And this is where they park the boat and throw their ropes and climb onto the submarine and start fighting everybody on top of the submarine, which is the big action sequence for the movie, where you see all the classic bam, pow, thwack, and sploosh. I love that sploosh was one of the words.
The bam.
So you have your sweet action scenes where everybody's fighting, and they both get pushed off by Catwoman at one point, and then climb back
course.
on and continue the fight. It's just all the ridiculousness you can imagine.
All of it.
Finally, the fight's concluded on the top, but Catwoman flees down the hatch, and they follow her down. Catwoman trips and is hurt, and that's when her mask comes off, and Batman figures out that it's Kitka, and his heart is broken.
How could you?
And they have this super like zoomed in intense scene where Robin's trying to console Batman and not Bruce, obviously. And Batman's in near tears, talking about how his heart can be broken and how why would Batman's heart be broken? It's just this long, silly scene. And then Robin puts her in bat cuffs. And they go over it and they see the vials and they figure out, oh, these must be in the ambassadors. They must be in these vials. And that's when the Commodore seemingly drunkenly stumbles out and reveals himself to Batman and everything, and then trips, just like Catwoman did, onto the vial, smashing the vials, and then proceeds to sneeze on the powder and blows all the dust of all the ambassadors into a million little bits. And this leads to a whole sequence, again, campy, over-the-top, silly sequence, where they're in the lab in full costume with lab coats and everything and goggles, going through every single piece of sand or dust and trying to use this separator machine to split them up. Meanwhile, the commissioner is on the phone with the president, who is on the phone with the world. It shows all these scenes of different countries, of people and giant crowds waiting for an answer on what the verdict is, if they can save them.
Just imagining Batman and Robin wearing their costumes and then wearing all of this scientific equipment on top of their costume.
Yeah, they had to be sweating their balls off. There's no way around it. So they have this tense moment. They run the machine, and then obviously they separated them successfully, so they're all in separate vials. They announce it to the commissioner, who then announces it to the press, who then announces it to the president, who then announces it to the world, and they show these scenes of all these different countries celebrating and cheering and going nuts because they successfully saved these ambassadors.
Yeah, Batman and Robin did it. Yeah.
And then they have this kind of funny scene where Robin talks about, well, you know, they have so much trouble working together. Maybe we could reshuffle a molecule or two to fix this and change it. And Adam West thinks about it for a second and goes, no, Robin, we shouldn't mess with what nature intended. They decide not to mess with the particles. Fast forward to the scene where they rehydrate them in the office. They rehydrate all of them, again, successfully, with the press and the police force in the room. And they continue arguing like nothing happened. However, there's a twist. Each ambassador is speaking a different language than their home country. So clearly something unintentionally got mixed. But now
that's a bit of an oopsie.
And then Robin says, you know, maybe this isn't such a bad thing. Now they can finally understand each other. And then I don't remember the exact line, but Adam West Batman says something along the lines, well, a mistake that may have humbled the world. the people like suggesting that because they speak different languages, now they can speak to each other, even though none of them can necessarily speak a different language. It's just the wrong language.
They might be able to understand like one other person at that table now.
No,
just one. Maybe. That's assuming that they just, you know, haven't completely had their brains switched to where the language that they're speaking now is now just the only one that they can understand.
Yeah, and now, again, they're arguing like nothing ever happened, which is, again, another satire on world organizations. And they drop little snide remarks about world organizations working together and failing to do so throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
A lot of political satire in this movie, which is probably why adults enjoy it just as much as kids for the most part. And then we have the final scene that you addressed earlier, where they, after the press and the police have swarmed around them, Batman says, "Now, Robin, let's leave, but discreetly." And so they back away to these windows in the corner where they have to use a handle to wind open these thin, narrow windows slowly, attach their ropes, turn back to make sure nobody's paying attention, and then climb through the window and do the iconic rope climb down the side of the wall where you get the splash screen, the end, and then it replaces the end with the living end, ... question mark.
And you get to see these two caped crusaders, costumed crime fighters, just very slowly descend the side of a building. It's
for the end credits.
Batman, can you make sure I tied this correctly? I don't want to fall all the way down.
So that's basically the end of the movie. They roll some credits, which back then they really only showed the major stars. They didn't really show much of the cast, which is unfortunate, but you get it.
Yeah.
It was a film of its time. We didn't talk about this earlier, but it made a moderate amount of profit. It's estimated that the film budget was a little over $1 million. Let me see if I can find the specs here. $1.3 million, almost 1.4 estimated, and then you add production to that. And then I couldn't find confirmation because they kind of kept things close to the chest during this era. But apparently, with promotion and everything, it was about twice that much. So about $3,400-ish, $1 million, $3 million, $400,000, and then they made a profit after everything was said and done of about $300,000, which, let me give you some context for that, which means they spent about $27 million total. So they made, roughly $30 million back of the 27 they spent, which by today's standards is a pretty small budget movie. Joker was made for about 45, so it's not impossible to make a big blockbuster film with this money. But clearly, money was not the priority for 20th Century Fox.
Yeah, especially when you take into account that this is riding on the heels of a season of the show that this is supposed to be directly connected to. And, well, the production was basically 3 episodes tied together.
Yeah. So, moderately successful. And I'd say the studio was probably okay with what happened because it got more press for their show, got more viewership for their show, and generated a little bit of extra income, which is always a good thing.
Worked as intended.
And, $3 million is $3 million. So I don't think anybody's going to complain about making that much profit.
No.
Anywhere.
No.
But just an interesting piece of information there. A few other things I did want to mention. This was the last role in a film, not necessarily for TV, because obviously it continued on TV, but in a film for Alan Napier, who played Alfred. He did not die until 1988, but he did not star in any other films after this. So,
wow,
something to note there. Even though he was, portrayed Alfred very well, especially in this campy universe. And then the other person who died quickly after this movie, he died in 1967, so a year later, less than a year later, at age 75, was the actor who portrayed the Commodore, who is Reginald Denny. So I thought that might be nice to note in there. A man who lived a good long life, was from the UK, born in 1891. And that, when you're watching that movie, you're watching a man who was born in 1891 and a man that was born in 1903. So two two men that certainly were old in the movie, but it's amazing you can get that context and say, damn,
it's like
he's born in the 1800s and I'm watching these people in movies.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy if you really think about it from today's perspective. So very interesting, very cool little tidbits. A lot of trivia around this movie. A lot of cult classic iconic moments and dialogue. We talked about the bomb running. That's been a famous GIF on the internet for probably 20 years now.
Oh, yeah. The 60s was a wild time.
We have the iconic, Batmobile being featured. You have the Bat Cycle, which is introduced for the first time. You have the Batcopter, which is introduced for the first time. You have the Bat Boat, which is never seen again on the show. But was featured in that episode. It gets a cameo, I think, in the first episode of the second season, but it never gets shown again, which is again another fun little trivia tidbit for you. But just because it was so expensive to film, they had to take a whole film crew out on the ocean and actually film it running around in water. So kind of interesting little tidbits. You get all of these new gadgets, you get all of these new vehicles, which I'm sure they marketed for toys and stuff for kids. Wouldn't be surprised. You have new actors and actresses leading iconic roles, and then you have people doing their iconic roles for the last time, at least for a season, like the Riddler. One thing that really stuck out to me during this film is that I'm not really a big fan of Cesar Romero's Joker, even in the context of being campy and silly. Personally, I actually think that this version of the Riddler, again portrayed by Frank Gorshin, I think he is a better Joker than the Joker is in terms of how he behaves and how he acts and how he maniacally laughs after every plan and plot. I feel like Cesar Romero just did not want to be there, which is kind of featured by the fact that he has this painted over mustache because he refused to shave his mustache for the film role. How he doesn't really have a real plot point in the film. He's just kind of along for the ride.
He's there because he's the Joker, and Batman always has to have the Joker around for some reason.
And it's funny because the Riddler obviously is sending clues to Batman and hatching plots to try to kill him. The Penguin is kind of the gang leader of the entire group and obviously is supplying all the funds and the financing and everything. Catwoman is obviously leading the kind of field work and spying on Batman and tricking Bruce Wayne so they can kidnap him, and obviously doing her typical thing throughout the entire thing. So everybody else has a major role to play, whereas Joker's just kind of there. He's just kind of the guy who follows the orders, which is weird. You don't think of Joker as the guy following the orders of all of the other villains.
Right.
You think of Joker disobeying them and doing whatever the fuck he wants because he has a better idea anyway. And
okay,
again,
you do bring up a fair point.
This is just one of the kind of many reasons why this version of Joker annoys me, because he's, they call him the Clown Prince of Crime, but he's not really royal in any sense of the word because he's taking orders from literally everybody else. He's not really doing anything other than being the Commodore's bitch boy and serving him tea. The actor himself refused to shave off his mustache for a simple role that he probably could have regrown in the matter of a few weeks.
Yeah.
And the acting, he's shown up by the Joker, or I'm sorry, the Riddler's actor, Frank Gorshin. I just don't see. I get why he's iconic for the look, but I don't get why he's held in such high regard compared to other people in the series that I feel did a much better job, especially people like the Penguin and even Catwoman. This is the first time we saw this version of Catwoman, and she did a great job.
They kind of let him be the clown bitch of crime this time around.
He really was. So I have some gripes. Obviously, the movie's not super long by modern standards, and as a Batman film, it's the only one under 2 hours, which, when you think about it, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
But it's 105 minutes long, so a good hour and a half there. Like you said, probably 3 episodes worth of content, and it does kind of have 3 different acts that you can follow.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. It was meant to be kind of a little accessory to the first season of the show to kind of get hype up for the second season of the show. Obviously, there's not really much canon that you need to follow because the characters don't even remain the same.
Not really.
There's a lot of changes that happen after this, a lot of different actors and actresses that portray the characters, and Obviously, some of the equipment never appears again, and if it does appear, it appears much later. So, just very interesting tidbits, But for what it is, I think it's, a fun, campy, ridiculous thing that should be remembered fondly, as a piece of satire, as a piece of silly humor, kind of an American version of the silly Monty Python type humor that was being created over in the UK.
Yeah, 60s Batman does fit in very well with Monty Python, now that I think about it.
And it fits the campy aesthetic of the kind of Silver Age ridiculousness we remember seeing in those classic comics, and kind of, unfortunately, the basis for a lot of mockery as well for superheroes and superhero content. And as much as people remember this fondly, I think the downside is that it really took the Superman movie to really revive comic books as some kind of respectable medium, and even that was kind of campy and silly, So
yeah, when it comes to the Superman movie, like reviving people's interest and ability to take it at least some kind of serious, I find that movie, while definitely a product of its time, is very much trying to bring back the earnestness of the idea of the superhero.
Yeah, so I definitely see your point, but from my perspective, obviously we're far, far in the future. We're about almost 60 years in the future now.
Yeah, we have the fortunate perspective of seeing all of this in far removed hindsight.
Yeah, about 54 years.
Yeah.
But obviously you have to take everything with a grain of salt. But it's not like a more serious tone wasn't created at some point. The serials were very serious in a lot of cases, not always, but there were serious serials based on comic books. We obviously had Superman the Mole Man, which is much more grounded, if not a little silly in itself. More so because the modern view of what was happening in it was kind of silly with the hillbilly rage and mob mentality that was going on. This movie, again, as iconic and silly and over the top and satirical as it was, and should be held in high regards from a modern lens for a lot of reasons, because, again, the series was very iconic. Again, having a black Catwoman was obviously extremely controversial at the time, but from a modern lens, it's like, yeah, no big deal, cool, But that was a big risk that they took in that third season. They premiered Batgirl, which is a female superhero, in the third season. They were actually trying to make her the premiere for the second movie. So they invested a lot of time and money. They're making snide comments about the incompetency of the Ministry of Defense and, the government and world leaders not being able to communicate or, work together in any way, shape, or form. So there's a lot of cool objective wisdom here in this movie.
Yeah.
If you really want to take a critical eye to it, which is great, and probably why it stands the test of time a lot better than Superman and the Mole Man, despite me liking Superman and the Mole Man a little bit better. So there's a lot to love, a lot to respect. Introduced a lot of different aspects and ideas that probably weren't really noticed or seen before. And for that, it really deserves to be commended. But again, I think it just did so many disservices to comic book fans, because now for the next 10 plus years, it was the basis for all the mockery. Oh, you're into that silly, ridiculous underpants thing where the goofy pows and bams and the ridiculous movie and the go-go dancers and everything. What a dork, what a nerd, what a loser, But if you look deeper, a lot of these books had some really great content, especially the original books,
Yeah.
A lot of serious connotations, especially as we got into the 70s, where you got the much more dark and centered books, because people coming home from Vietnam wanted something a little bit more serious, and because they had a pretty horrifying experience in Vietnam. So the culture changed greatly, and this was seen as silly and childish and ridiculous, even though there was great threads of satire and humor and commentary about different things that are still relevant today. So unfortunately, I feel like it probably did more disservice to the comic book community and fans of comic books that really took kind of the revolution of the Marvel books, kind of having more grounded human stories in the 70s with Stan Lee and those creators, and kind of pushing the narrative forward in the late 60s, early 70s and so forth, and the culture changing around Vietnam. It really took a lot to get to Superman, the movie. And
it did take a lot.
Shed that campy, ridiculous, childish phase. And even that, from a modern lens is campy and silly and over the top. So I'm very conflicted on this movie. I don't want to dislike it, but I also kind of do. For both what it did for the culture, but there's no good reason from a modern lens as a person that didn't live during the 70s and 80s and have to suffer with the stereotypes created by this necessarily. Obviously we grew up both of us primarily before the Marvel phase really kicked off, before the Nolanverse really kicked off and gave some respectability to these movies. I mean, we're basically teenagers when X-Men and stuff like that came out and started to ground comic book movies a little bit more. But, movies like this and the movies by Joel Schumacher, really, really hurt the community and really gave a bad visage to pop culture for comic book fans and nerdom, and whether they could enjoy the media in peace, more or less. Now it's not a big deal. Everybody likes superheroes and comic books media, whether it's a show or a movie or the comic book itself or an animated series, whatever the case is, So there was a lot of recovery that had to be done, both through the animated series, whether it's Batman the animated series, which is much more serious, the X-Men animated series, which is much more serious, Spider-Man the animated series. Superman was a little campy, but even that, had some more groundwork to it.
Yeah.
Justice League, the animated series, all of this comic book media, Turtles was very goofy and over the top as a cartoon series, even though the comic was very dark and sinister and kind of bloody and gory.
Yeah, that was quite the switch, especially as someone who hadn't really read any of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics, going from their classic 80s, 90s cartoons and movies and then going back to read those comic books, it is nearly unrecognizable what they turned those turtles into by comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a good series on Netflix if you care to check it out. It's called The Toys That Made Us.
Yeah.
Where one of the episodes features Ninja Turtles, and they talk about the drastic difference between, Kirkman's Ninja Turtles series and what eventually became the cartoon, which was very silly and cartoony and clearly for children.
Right.
Even though we have fond memories of it and everything.
Yeah, trying to drive toy sales, essentially.
Whereas stuff like X-Men, Spider-Man, Batman the Animated Series, that stuff challenged me as a kid, Challenged you, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
And even today can challenge you quite a bit, even though it is, at its core, a cartoon series that was targeted primarily at, children and teenagers. But there was a lot of context and thought put into these series, whereas prior to that, it was all kind of surrounded by this campy aspect. And, maybe Batman 1989 has a lot to do with that as well, with the portrayal there, which is still kind of campy and over the top, of course.
Yeah. Tim Burton really knows how to, ride the line between full-on, damn near Edward Scissorhands style camp and going straight into the dark and weird.
So, just personally, I know you think of it very fondly, and I totally understand why. I'm not saying that you're wrong in any way, shape, or form. I'm probably in the minority here for this opinion, but I'm just very conflicted, and I struggled to give it the credit I know that it's due. So for me, it's very conflicted. How do you feel about it?
When it comes to Batman 66, I think the thing that always kind of grounds me in just a general sense of joy in watching this movie is actually the opening set of scrawled texts along the bricks, letting the audience know exactly what they're in for, who they're trying to reach, and the open admission that this is just pure escapism and we're doing this because we think it's fun.
Yeah, it's very self-aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is that immediate self-awareness that when it comes to watching this movie, while I can recognize the time period, specifically the 60s and 70s, where comics at large were trying to find their way into the type of stories that they wanted to tell, the type of stories that they thought they needed to tell.
Yeah.
This was also, in a way, a product of moving from the 50s into the 60s. It was like going into the Cold War, the constant talk and possible threat of there being some kind of like nuclear war Armageddon between the United States and Russia. Like this movie doing what it can to not just tell you tell you a superhero tale for the ages where Batman and Robin get to the bottom of a sinister plot constructed by several of their villains together, while also having some commentary about current events at that time.
Yeah. I mean, they had like the Solaris missile and all of these different things, mentioned.
Yeah.
Obviously being relevant to the Cold War area, and just a lot of very cool things.
Yeah. I love this movie for its nearly labyrinthine, just open stride into trying to be lighthearted and fun and campy and satirical and poignant and weirdly sexual.
Definitely weirdly sexual at times.
And also like very kind of like commercial in its attempt to like, oh, look at all of these things that Batman has. Look at these vehicles and all of the things that they can do.
All the Bat gadgets.
And then their attempt to try to make, at least towards the end, try to make Batman like very human, very relatable. Like, oh, why would Batman have a broken heart? Come with us, Robin. What they're doing is probably the most important work any group of leaders has ever done in their entire life. But let's leave discreetly.
It's so ridiculous.
It's ridiculous in how serious, at least on the surface, these characters were taking the situations that they were placed in, while at the same time being so fucking aware of itself that I love this movie so much. I love it, and I love just about everything about it. There might be like one or two things where I'm just like, okay, this just looked like, especially with the bomb scene, it just looked like, oh, we have like about 1,001 different cuts of how this thing goes down. And, well, I'm not sure how much of this we want to leave on the cutting room floor. You want us to use all of it? You want to? I mean, he runs into these people like several times. It's like there's no way.
There's even a shot where you can see the film crew in the reflection of the window. I noticed that when I was watching. I was like, that's the film crew.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do with making Batman the focus in a shot.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, this is... I love how much of a time capsule this movie is. But also its ability to kind of stand on its own and also become so beloved that, I mean, any movie that can still make memes in the current day, I mean, that's a win for me.
There's a little bit of pop culture relevance here.
A little bit.
Even though it's, 54 years old. So that's always impressive. When you can stay relevant that long, that's always a win. So on that note, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode of Comic Movie Master List from Hit the Books Podcast.
Number 1.
I can't believe it's number 1. But we've only reviewed 2. So,
yes.
Again, if you haven't watched it, go check out Superman the Mole Man on episode 1 of Comic Movie Master List. And then, obviously, if you want to, rewatch this episode.
Yeah.
Give it a like, a share, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. All of that stuff really helps us out. You can watch it on YouTube. You can listen on Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, Spotify. We're on all of the major streaming services. We're not on SoundCloud. Sorry, I'm not going to do it. So feel free to check us out on any of those. Of course, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/hitthebooks. We know money is really tight right now. We have no expectation for anybody to submit money to help us keep the show running. But if you would, we have grown significantly with our sets, with our mic quality, with our editing quality. Everything has been able to be sustained thanks to generous donations, both past and present, which are very much appreciated. Once again, thank you to Heather Reet for being a current executive producer of the show. So you do get that shout out as required by the Patreon tier that you subscribe to. So thank you very much. We love you. Thanks for your support. And of course, thanks for all the support from former subscribers to our Patreon. Feel free to subscribe on there and help us out if you are able. Of course, it's a time of crisis. Do not put yourself out or inconvenience yourself or your family because you want to support us. We know it's very important to stay sane, stay healthy, and obviously be financially responsible during a time of crisis. But if you are able and willing, we would very much appreciate it if you can help us keep the show going and give us a little bit of support. If not, giving us a thumbs up or a subscribe really, really helps us out even more. So please do so if you haven't already.
Also, tell your friends.
Please do. If you have any fellow comic book nerds and friends and family that you think would have a good time watching the show, whether it's the podcast, whether it's the Comic Movie Master List, whether it's the Hit the Mats channel for wrestling, which may or may not be making a return in the near future. We'll see. It's going to have a whole new organization if it does. And then obviously we have several instructional videos and plenty more content coming. So be sure to check that out if you so choose. It is on there for you, free of charge. Please enjoy it. We put a lot of work into it, and we'd love for you to enjoy it with us. And, of course, check out every week's episode of Hit the Books Podcast, which premieres usually on Wednesday or Thursday if we're able. Sometimes time crunches happen, like during the coronavirus, but usually we get it out there within a decent amount of time. So I think that is everything, old chum. Now, I think it's time that we leave these men to their work and leave discreetly through the window.
I'm just gonna take a second to open it. Oh, almost there. Make sure to double knot. Don't wanna fall all the way down.
Right, old chum. Secure the bat rope.
It's gonna be a while before we get down, isn't it?
I also like how when they climb on a single rope, it's always nut to butt. And on that note, we bid you adieu. Thank you for watching and listening. We really love and appreciate you. See you next time on Hit the Books Podcast and Comic Movie Master List. Oh, before we go, real quick.
Oh.
The next movie, I know I mentioned it earlier, just to remind you, is Tales from the Crypt, circa 1972, based on the EC Comics title of the same name. Tales from the Crypt, check it out. It's coming.
Tell your friends.
Very soon. Very soon, old chum. Till next time.
Nut to butt.
Batman.